Hello, I'm Stan Hall. Welcome to this edition of the Gwinnett Sports Commission's Get in the Game. With Gwinnett having the largest school system in the state of Georgia and one of the largest in the nation, we also have one of the largest overall athletic programs. With approximately 20 high schools, competition in almost every sports discipline, and a whole bunch of student athletes, that's a lot of coordination for someone. Today we have that someone as our guest. John Wire is the athletic director for the Gwinnett Public School System, and we'll talk a little bit about this mammoth undertaking. John, welcome to the show and thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Stan. My pleasure.
So we know you're the athletic director for the Gwinnett Public School System, but you've obviously done a lot of things before that, some here in Gwinnett. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I started in education in 1982, which is quite a while ago. Started my teaching and coaching career in Texas. That took me then through the state of Pennsylvania, where I continued and ended up here 15 years ago. My last 8 years I spent at Peachtree Ridge High School, working as an AP and an athletic director there.
So we talked about in our opening just how big this school system is, and it's huge. It's a huge school system. I think there's over 200,000 students or so. So when you have a school system that big, how many of those students, or do you know, how many of those are participating in sports in our high school?
Well, last year, Stan, we had 15,000 high school student athletes, 1,200 middle school students participated in sports. 9,000 were males and 6,000 were females. So we like to keep an eye on those numbers. We are trying to increase our participation numbers as well. But we're very proud of that.
Mm-hmm. You know, I often wondered, and when you have a school system that big, which creates more potential athletes, which creates more competition, is it tougher, you think, in a school system as large as Gwinnett's for that athlete who really just wants to get involved in a sport to really be successful? Is there any correlation, you think, to that?
Well, no doubt it's very competitive in Gwinnett. But I think with the growth of our youth leagues, there's a lot of connection between the high schools, the middle schools, and the youth leagues. So our students learn to excel at an early age, both in the classroom and on the playing field. So it's sort of part of growing up in Gwinnett.
Yeah, that competition doesn't just start when they get to that high school level. They've been experiencing that, as you said, from youth sports up.
Yes, they have.
Yeah. So, John, you've been the athletic director in Gwinnett now for a little over a year. Is that about right? Or
it'll be a year in July.
Year in July, and you fill some pretty big shoes when you stepped in with Mike Emery, who had been the athletic director for a long time, retired, and then of course you were named as the AD. How did that go? I mean, that's a pretty daunting task, I think, to step in when somebody's been in there a long time. How did that transition go with you and Mike?
It went great. You know, to replace 30 years of institutional knowledge is not easy. We were able to spend the month of July together. And Mike first started introducing me to the people who supported the athletic office, and we started building relationships there. And then we looked at the policies and procedures, the way things are done at the county level. Right. And then we spent the rest of the time talking about, you know, our vision, what we're looking at 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and he was instrumental in making that transition a smooth one.
Yeah. I would think, knowing Mike as well as I do, he was fairly meticulous with the things he done. So hopefully he did leave it in a spot where you could step in, and a lot of that foundational work was easier to, you know, to transfer over to you, I would think.
Yeah,
so.
I didn't realize, being a local AD, Mike was instrumental in a lot of things. Yeah. And he has a great vision. He was planning on moving the district forward, and then I get a chance to continue his work. One of the things that he did, which was really neat, he started an aspiring athletic administrators program. And we had 15 candidates, and those are teachers, coaches, administrators who eventually want to become an athletic director. Right. And he built the curriculum and the model for that, and I was fortunate to be able to implement that. Yeah. And that was a lot of fun.
Well, and you just said that you, before this role, you were an athletic director at a high school, so you've seen that side of it. Now you're the athletic director for the whole system. and you're seeing that side of it. With so many high schools in place, almost every sports discipline in place at these high schools, all these athletes involved, I know that each school has an athletic director. It would seem to me almost impossible for you to keep your finger on the pulse of everything that's going on. Tell me a little bit about your coordination with the individual athletic directors and how you sort of interface with them.
Well, fortunately, I already established a relationship with the athletic directors. They are the key component as far as managing all of the athletics at the school, and been able to work on communication with them. One of the things that I started doing early on in August, I started visiting each school and just walking and talking with the athletic director and looking at the facilities, trying to get to know them at a little bit of a deeper level. And it was very inspiring because they're very passionate about their school and what they're doing for student athletes. So it's very exciting to continue that work. But once again, communication, I think, is the utmost importance. Additionally, I've been able to go visit different schools when they play different sporting events. I've been to football, basketball games, and been touring and going to some different spring events. And you kind of see the culmination of what an athletic director does, because all that preparation and all that work that they put into hosting an event, you get to see that. So that was real interesting as well.
Sort of as a comparative example, and let's just use the Southeastern Conference as an example, where they have a commissioner, and it seems like a lot of the mandates come from that office and trickle down to the individual schools. Is that true on your level too, as far as the policies and procedures for all of these athletic directors to follow? Does that come from you down to them, or is it more of a give and take between?
Well, the Board of Education establishes policies and procedures, but there's also good practices that come from my office. And those come from maybe GHSA recommendations, or I've been able to visit with other district administrators around the state and some around the country and look at how they're doing things. And so if we think it's what's best for our student athletes, it's best for our school, it's best for our district, then we'll implement those things.
As an over sort of a policy that affects all schools.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Touching a little bit more about the competition aspect that we mentioned earlier in our conversation today, I've been really amazed at how many Division I signees that I'm seeing as that signing time comes around. And I've been around a long time, and I remember if you had one of our athletes who would sign with a Division I school, or if we had two, you thought, man, that is great. But now, when this time rolls around, you've got every school that's calling a press conference, and you've got 8 or 10 kids lined up at each school. What do you think about that? It's pretty remarkable.
It is. It's remarkable. And it's also very exciting. It's very fortunate for a lot of these students to be able to have those opportunities. I think one of the things, if you look at, we have great schools.
Yeah.
And the product that we're putting out there, there's a track record of success. Our students are not only successful athletically, but they're also successful academically. So I think colleges take note of that. Another thing that I realized in this position is that our high school coaches have relationships established with these colleges, which I think is very beneficial as well.
Yes.
And the colleges trust the knowledge that our coaches have. And that's been vital, I think, to having some of these students sign that might not be that star of the team. And then you look at, Gwinnett's performed very well the last, quite a few years at the state level.
Yes.
And, hopefully each sport represents themselves at the state competition. And we've been very successful at that. So I think, with the combination of those things, plus the competitive nature of Gwinnett, that college coaches love to come here because it's an easy recruit with all the schools, 19 high schools located in the same area. But they also trust that they'll get a great student athlete when they choose them.
I guess it was a couple of years ago I had a chance to go to one of the college coaches fairs that took place here in Gwinnett County. and from what I could gather, they weren't really looking for the, you know, the big stars, as you would say, on the teams. They were looking for people who might fall categorically underneath that. But the room was full. I mean, there were so many coaches in there from colleges all over the place. So it must be a very fertile ground, as you said, for trying to get people to come to their school.
I've attended that for the last couple of years. It's fascinating to watch how all of the Gwinnett schools are represented, and the recruiters and the coaches come in, and they'll sit down at a table, and they will, you know, a lot of times they know what they're looking for. Mm-hmm. And our coaches are very good at providing students to fill those spots. Mm-hmm. You know, it's changed in the last few years with electronics and with things like Huddle and so on, that, you know, it used to be before you would share a profile of a student sitting with the coach.
Right.
Now what they'll do is they'll talk about the student and they'll send an email to the coach with that student's profile and maybe some highlight videos just while they're sitting there face to face. So, you know, that has changed, and that's been very beneficial.
It's all very sophisticated.
It is very sophisticated. You know, and our students do, not just our students, but high school students are not afraid to recruit themselves.
Yeah, well, good for them.
They do that with their social media.
Yeah. John, we're going to take a break and come back and finish up with some more points in a little bit too as well. So we're talking today with John Wire, who is the athletic director for the Gwinnett County Public School System. We're going to take a short break. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey, you.
Yeah, you. Getting that college education?
What are you gonna do? Graduate and take some office job?
Be like everybody else?
Or will you dare do something different?
Like, be a teacher. You could be my teacher.
You got the skills, the smarts.
Yes, you.
You could be the teacher I never forget.
That'd be cool.
Does that corporate job even have recess?
What are you gonna make of yourself?
What are you gonna make of me?
I'm a teacher. Let me tell you what I make. I make learning a privilege, not a chore, and frustration a tool, not an obstacle. I make working hard seem easy and giving up impossible. I make an old subject feel like a fresh thought and unconventional methods common. I'm a teacher. I make more.
Welcome back to the show. We're talking today with John Wire, who is the athletic director for the Gwinnett County Public School System. John, before we took the break, we had talked a little bit about athletes and signing, you know, with the major colleges, et cetera. I want to talk about one topic that's really not a high school issue, but, you know, I think there is some things how it could affect some of our high school athletes as they choose their school. And I'm talking a little bit about the stipend conversation that's been going on in colleges. What is your basic opinion of that? And I know that's a very broad question, but what's your opinion of that?
You know, Stan, my opinion is, I think colleges should go there. If we go back a little bit, I'd like to have them take a look at scholarships and how scholarships are awarded. You know, there are 6 college sports that offer full scholarships. Mm-hmm. And I think what I would like to see is, let's take baseball and softball, for example. Baseball team might get 9 scholarships. Well, that coach has to decide, what am I going to do with those 9 scholarships? Is that a full scholarship I'm going to give that athlete, or am I going to split that scholarship up? Right. So it's a little deceiving when we hear students receiving scholarships, because it doesn't necessarily mean that they're getting their tuition, their room, and their board paid for. So before we get to the stipend, I would like to see the NCAA use some of that money to increase the scholarship opportunities for these students, the full scholarship opportunities for these students.
You know, and I don't know enough about it to even comment on it, but one of the things I wondered is, could it ever get to the point, because all schools aren't held to the same stipend apparently, the way the conversation's been going. I can see where an athlete might say, well, I've got this school and this school, but this, you know, I'm gonna get a little more money out of this school, where instead of it becoming just an athletic decision, it could become an athletic and a monetary decision for that high school kid. Don't you think that could happen?
I would be afraid that we would be recruiting the students for the wrong reasons. You know, we want them to be a student athlete, but if, School A has more money to offer than School
Exactly.
B. As a human being, and common sense says most likely that we would choose School A.
Exactly.
And I don't think that to put an 18-year-old and his family in that situation is not right.
Well, I think it's going to be an interesting conversation to watch and see how that evolves as it goes
Yes,
forward
it
as
is.
well. One thing, excuse me, that does affect our high schools is the conversation that's getting very loud about sports concussion. I know that in football always seems to be the one that's sort of, it's centered around, but there's other sports where sports concussions are potentially could occur as well. So what's Gwinnett County doing to react to that issue a little bit?
Well, I think we're getting smarter. Football, not only football, but all sports. I was at a school and one of our flag corps, the students that are out on the field at halftime.
Right.
She got hit in the head and suffered a concussion. So it's not just a football issue, but you're right. Football does attract most of the attention. End of February, I was able to attend the USA Football Conference in Indianapolis, and they are promoting this heads-up tackling, heads-up blocking technique, which I think would be interesting to use at our youth levels.
Right.
But in Gwinnett, we are fortunate because our Board of Education and Gwinnett Medical Center, we have a contract where we are able to provide 2 certified trainers at each high school. And what that does is I think takes the pressure off the coaches to make that decision about is a student able to play or not. Additionally, we're fortunate here because we have the Concussion Institute.
Exactly.
And the Concussion Institute is just a fascinating medical facility that works with students and adults with concussions.
One of few, not only in the state, but in our area, in southeast, so it's very unusual to have it here.
Correct. So when I was playing, my coach was the decision maker in this process. Sometimes he informed the parents, sometimes he did not about, are we able to play or continue to play. Well, that's all changed now, and the state of Georgia's involved, the GHSA's involved. We've made the parents more aware of concussion protocol, and I think an important piece that is in play in Gwinnett is not only do we follow protocol for students to return to play, there's also protocol for them to return to the classroom, which is a lot of times we don't, we are only looking at when is a student going to be able to play again, but there's a lot of information that we did not have just a few years ago to help teachers transition these student athletes back into the classroom.
Because there are so many things other than that ability to play sports that go into a concussion scenario. And I mean, just the basic light that they can take and things like that. There's a lot of things involved.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then finally, we're very fortunate because we have some training modules. The National Federation of High School offers some training modules that we ask our coaches to complete, and one of them is a concussion awareness form. So it's an educational piece. I know that, I think we're playing safer, we're being safer.
Right.
I think we are monitoring more than we ever have, and that I think with a combination of things, we'll see the game continue to be safe and even safer.
Right. Well, why it's not directly related, but it sort of is. Some parents, despite all efforts that are being made to sort of, neutralize that situation a little bit, and as you said, be smarter about that situation. Some are choosing to take their kids into other sports. I know that I'm not saying it's a direct reaction to that, but Gwinnett schools, I think, have done a great job of staying up with emerging sports as well. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, we've noticed an increase in the participation numbers in, of course, lacrosse.
Right.
And also in volleyball. And those 2 sports have really exploded. Volleyball numbers, we're looking at probably for the first time that I can remember that we have more girls playing volleyball than we do girls basketball.
I read that, and I was surprised to see that.
And I think it's just a sign that, volleyball is a very social sport. And we have been a little bit behind in Gwinnett, but if you kind of look at the last few years, we are creeping up closer to getting that first state championship. Lacrosse as well, the North boys lacrosse teams ranked #1 in the state.
Right.
And you're looking at those two sports, and let's look at lacrosse, because lacrosse does have a little bit of football in it.
Right.
There's still some contact, and it's a sport that has seen growth across the nation. And so we are trying to keep up with qualified coaches, because our coaches have not grown up with lacrosse here in Gwinnett. So that's been a challenge at some of our schools as well.
Right. I know that in conversations with the Georgia Swarm, when they were considering bringing their team, which they obviously did here to Gwinnett, one of their reasons was that they felt like lacrosse in Gwinnett really foundationally was just about to explode, and it sounds like that was accurate. So
Agreed. I was at a Swarm game the other night, and just the excitement. A lot of young lacrosse players were in attendance, and I think with the Swarm being here, and we've been able to tap into some of their talent and help some of the local schools. Some of their athletes are working with some of our lacrosse coaches as well. That I think we can build the skill, build the knowledge of the game of lacrosse, and hopefully we can kind of get us over the edge there and get our first state championship.
absolutely. John, a couple of years ago, my daughter we were doing the college search, and we went to some big schools and some small schools. Some of the small schools, the thing that really was just so obvious to me was I was looking at their sporting facilities. Some of Gwinnett's high schools were, I thought, in better shape, bigger, et cetera, than some of the small colleges were. How important is it in Gwinnett that we maintain that level of what I consider to be excellence as far as our facilities go?
Well, it's utmost importance. Unfortunately, the students don't always finish at the high school where they start.
Right.
And it's amazing when we have families moving from one county into Gwinnett, they always comment on the facilities, the stadiums and the gyms and so on. Our coaches take a lot of pride in that. Our athletic directors take a lot of pride in that. We have a grounds crew, our Board of Education supports that, our superintendent. And it's very important. Number one, it's a safety issue. Sports liability is very important to us. But number two, I think it is important that, part of having a good school are those athletic facilities. It's a total package, and we work very hard to maintain that.
John, last question of the day. Gwinnett County has such a really wonderful record of excellence in athletics here, and it's been going on for a long time. As the athletic director, what's your biggest challenge day to day to maintain that level now that you're the AD for the county?
Stan, I think there's three things. Number one, we need to hire those great teacher coaches. When we need to retain them, we need to keep them in Gwinnett. We have some coaches that are getting near the end of their career,
Right.
and it's important that we mentor some of our young coaches so that when a position opens at the varsity level, we can keep our coaches here, we can hire from within. Second part of that, I think, is the athletes. I still believe that for many of these athletes, for a high percentage of these athletes, high school sports should be the most important time of their life. Being a student athlete, the relationships they make with their coaches, their teammates, with their school. For some of them, it will never get better than it is now, and I want to maintain that, and I want them to have fun while they're doing it.
This is their shining moment.
This is their shining moment, and that's what that's what it's about.
Right.
And the third thing is, which we talked about, is the facility piece. We need to continue. And I worked for a principal that said either you're getting better or you're getting worse.
Exactly.
And so we have to constantly look at how can we improve not only the product, but where the product is playing on.
Well, John, it's been a real pleasure hearing about your experience as the new AD, and it sounds like that we're in very good hands, and we appreciate everything that you do. And certainly thanks for spending some time with us today as well.
And thank you and to the Sports Commission for all their support as well, Stan.
Thank you very much. That's all the time we have today. If you have questions or comments about today's show or ideas for future shows, you can reach us at the phone number or email address shown at the end of the show. Thanks for being with us. I'm Stan Hall. See you next time on Get in the Game. Goodbye.